A man had been sitting silently at a blackjack table for 12 hours, betting on every single round, with $100,000 in chips. The surveillance cameras were tracking his every move in real time. In the corner, the casino manager kept his eyes glued on him. The man wasn't breaking any rules. He was just using standard betting methods and was on an incredible winning streak. Over the next 6 months, using this same technique, the man from 3 well-known casinos accumulated a profit of $15 million. On the surface, the man's play was completely within the rules, but in reality, it was a precise exploitation of the casino's own rules. In 2008, the impact of the global financial crisis meant the gambling industry's glory days were over. The stock market crash caused people's wealth to shrink dramatically, and for most, gambling and entertainment budgets were the first things to get cut. To win back their lost customers, marketing teams at major casinos racked their brains. Complimentary luxury suites, high-end dining, tickets to hit shows, and even private jet services. These standard perks were no longer enough to impress the high rollers. As competition in the industry became white-hot, some casinos introduced a loss rebate program. If a player's losses reached an agreed-upon amount, they would receive 10 to 15% of their money back. On the surface, it looked like the casinos were ceding their edge, but in reality, operators were confident that this model would still maintain their inherent probabilistic advantage. Various gambling establishments soon joined this benefits war, one after another, rolling out the red carpet for high rollers. Johnson was one of them. He started receiving invitation after invitation from various casinos. But these were not just simple invitations to play. They were offering unprecedented partnership requests. Faced with 3 casinos competing for him, Johnson didn't rush to respond. Instead, he contacted several. The probability experts took all the conditions offered by the casino and laid them out one by one, including the rules for 6-deck blackjack. The dealer stands on 17. You can double down on any 2 cards. The maximum single-hand bet is $100,000. And if losses exceed $500,000, you get a rebate of 20%, among other core terms. The team of experts, using complex algorithmic models, ran repeated simulations and gave Johnson a game-changing conclusion. The 20% loss rebate completely overturned the casino's inherent advantage. As long as he used a precise betting strategy and controlled the duration of the game, he could gain an absolute probabilistic edge. A conservative estimate was that with this advantage alone, he could secure a steady daily profit of $175,000. But Johnson's ambition didn't stop there. His ultimate goal was $15 million. This meant that 3 casinos would have to agree to all his conditions at the same time. The biggest problem was that casinos usually share information on high rollers. If one of them refused and sent out a warning, the entire plan would be ruined. Johnson had only one chance to negotiate. This contest of mathematics and human nature was gradually reaching a fever pitch. In December of 2010, a man wearing a gray hoodie walked into the Tropicana casino. He had no luxurious clothes or expensive accessories and looked just like an ordinary tourist. This person was, of course, Johnson. Usually, high-stakes gamblers are keen on attracting attention, hoping for special treatment from the casino to show off their status. Johnson, however, deliberately kept a low profile, which was, in fact, part of his meticulous plan. The casino manager led Johnson into a private office. On the table, a partnership agreement was already prepared. The manager immediately began his introduction. The core offer was that if his losses in a single session reached $500,000, he would get a rebate of 20% of his buy-in. The game was a 6-deck blackjack with relaxed rules. The maximum bet per hand was $100,000. The only requirement was to prepay $1 million as a security deposit. After hearing the terms, Johnson agreed. He only proposed 3 adjustments. The first was to require the dealer, upon getting a hand of 17, to stand rather than follow the standard rule of hitting. In blackjack's standard rules, the dealer hitting on 17 can increase the casino's odds by about 0.6%. The manager quickly did the math in his head, but to keep such a big client, he ultimately agreed. Next, Johnson made his second demand, the right to split pairs and double down. Most casinos, in order to protect their edge, would reject such a request outright. But after a moment's hesitation, the manager chose to compromise. His third request was to add the late surrender option. The manager, without giving it much thought, readily agreed. These three rule adjustments, while seemingly independent of each other, and while their individual impact on the casino's advantage was minuscule, when stacked together, they could greatly diminish the casino's inherent advantage. However, the casino management's attention was entirely fixated on the $1 million prepaid deposit. They were eagerly anticipating Johnson suffering a massive loss at the tables. They believed these rule changes were merely the client's personal preferences and of no real consequence. They were completely unaware of the hidden risks involved, and with the 20% loss rebate. With the loss rebate, the scales of victory had already quietly tipped in Johnson's favor. The manager, after a simple calculation, immediately agreed to all his demands. Both parties signed the agreement on the spot. Johnson deposited a $1 million security deposit, and the partnership was officially sealed. After that, Johnson used the same process and demands to approach the Borgata Casino and Caesars Casino. Three identical agreements became the hidden danger that would cause the three casinos massive losses in the future. At the same time, Johnson also privately negotiated an appearance fee clause. As long as he came to bet, regardless of whether he won or lost, he would receive $50,000 in cash. This meant that Johnson only had to step through the casino doors to make a guaranteed $50,000. Combined with the mathematical advantage from the favorable rules and the loss rebate, his expected daily profit could reach $175,000 to $200,000. And all the while, the casinos were kept completely in the dark. In December 2010, the first gambling session kicked off at Caesars Casino. Johnson calmly paid his security deposit and sat down at the blackjack table. His goal was crystal clear: either win $500,000 or lose $500,000. If he won, he would cash out and leave. If he lost, he would get a 20% rebate. No matter the result, the odds were on his side. He bet $100,000 on every hand. He won the first round. He lost the second. Then he won two in a row. After a few hours, his profits accumulated to $400,000, just one step away from his goal. Johnson remained calm the whole time. When his winnings reached $450,000, he decisively stopped and cashed out. The manager of Caesars Casino watched him walk away, but didn't give it a second thought. For high rollers, a win or loss of $450,000 was nothing to bat an eye at. They were figured Johnson would most likely lose it back next time, but they never expected that this was just the beginning of his massive profit scheme. About 2 weeks later, Johnson appeared at the poker table again, and with his calm and steady decision-making, he won round after round. In just a few short hours, he had $600,000 in his pocket. The assassin game still had room for profit, but he knew very well that being too greedy would easily raise suspicion. So while he was way ahead, he decisively cashed out and left. In January of 2011, Johnson returned to Caesars Casino. This time, he walked away with $800,000. At this point, Caesar's cumulative losses to him had surpassed $2 million. The management was in a panic. They held an emergency meeting to discuss whether they should ban him from the casino. However, every single move Johnson made was completely by the book. They couldn't find a single reason to refuse him. Then came April. Johnson stepped into Caesars again, but was met with a completely different situation. First, his $300,000 in chips went down the drain. Then, he lost another $500,000. His total losses reached $800,000. The manager at Caesars could finally breathe a sigh of relief. According to their agreement, Johnson would get 20% of his losses back, which was $160,000. His actual loss was $640,000. No one realized that this seemingly accidental defeat was actually an elaborate smokescreen he had carefully set up. Before this, Johnson had already won $1,200,000 from Caesars. Even after giving this amount back, his total winnings were still over $500,000. But more importantly, this deliberate loss completely erased all of the casino's suspicions. A month later, The high point of this gamble officially began. Johnson set his sights on the Tropicana Casino, a place famous for its high-stakes betting. The venue was about to witness a classic showdown in gambling history. Johnson had been laying the groundwork for this day. He had always maintained the image of a lucky player, building trust with multiple casinos, making them believe all his wins were down to pure chance. Now, he was finally ready to show his true skills. In the Tropicana's VIP area, 6 decks of cards were neatly arranged. Just as the dealer finished shuffling by hand, Johnson raised his hand and pushed 100,000 in chips into the betting area. The first hand was turned over, blackjack, an instant win of 150,000 US dollars. On the next hand, he won another 100,000. After just 2 rounds, he was up by 250,000. The casino manager, watching from the sidelines, just figured it was a normal lucky streak and didn't think much of it. But Johnson didn't stop. Though he lost a hand here and there, the scales of victory were always tipped in his favor. 3 hours later, his winnings had surpassed 1.2 million US dollars. The crowd of onlookers grew larger and larger, and hushed gasps filled the air. The security team launched another full-scale investigation, trying to find any sign of card counting, collusion, or any other foul play. In the end, however, they found nothing. After a grueling 5-hour battle, his winnings soared to 2.1 million. The casino's management was in a complete panic. Executives urgently summoned gaming security experts to review the surveillance footage frame by frame. The team of experts, after repeated analysis, concluded there was without any sign of cheating. At 6 p.m., after 8 hours of play, Johnson's winnings had reached $3.8 million. When the casino manager saw this, he couldn't hold back any longer. He went over, attempting to tactfully break Johnson's rhythm. But Johnson saw right through his intentions. He calmly stated that he didn't need a break. According to their contract, the casino had no right to forcibly end the game. They could only watch as the situation spiraled out of control. By 9 p.m., after 11 straight hours of this showdown, his winnings broke 5.2 million. The casino's CEO was urgently summoned back to the floor. He frantically ordered his subordinate to immediately notify the math team to analyze this playing style and see if it held a positive expected return for the player. But it was all too late. Johnson's winning streak continued. At 10 o'clock that night, this epic game, which had lasted 12 hours, was finally coming to an end. Johnson was dealt 2 8s. The dealer's up card was a 6. He decisively chose to split. The total bet on the table rose to 200,000. On his first 8, he was dealt a 3, and without hesitation, he doubled down. The next card was a 10, making it a perfect 21. He also doubled down on his other hand, bringing the total bet to 400,000. Then, a 9 was dealt, making 19. When the dealer flipped his whole card, it was also a 6. He chose to hit and ended up busting. On that hand alone, Johnson won $400,000. The crowd erupted in amazement. At that point, his total winnings for the day had reached 5.8 million. Johnson slowly stood up and calmly asked to cash out his chips. The staff, after repeatedly counting the chips 3 times to confirm the amount was correct, paid him in cash. Johnson didn't make a single celebratory gesture. He simply walked out of the casino, completely composed, leaving the management team in his wake. It was utter chaos. They immediately contacted other casinos to ask what was happening. The Borgata Casino responded, reporting a cumulative loss of 5 million. Caesars Casino then revealed a loss of 4 million. In just 6 short months, Johnson, using completely legal and legitimate methods, had won a cumulative total of $15 million from the 3 casinos. This incident quickly sent shockwaves through the gaming industry. All the casinos in Atlantic City scrambled to cancel their high roller loss rebate programs. The new policy permanently capped these rebates at 10%. Through industry-wide information sharing, Johnson was blacklisted by every major casino in the world. The Division of Gaming Enforcement immediately launched a full-scale investigation. They meticulously reviewed surveillance footage, player contracts, and all transaction records. In the end, their conclusion was clear. Every move the player made was completely legal, conducted strictly within the framework of the agreed-upon rules. No violations of any kind were found. This battle, fought over the rules of the game, ended in a total victory for Johnson.